Alrighty, guys, come on in. We're going to worship a little bit. Just celebrate the fact that we are created to be in community, the fact that we are created to be worshipers of God. Not just consumers, not just people that passively engage, but we're called to be involved in that process. So come on in. Let's worship for a little bit here.
Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught heart to fill and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. Oh, as promised good to me, His word my hope secure. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior is ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you, oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up our eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up our eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone. And I will not be shaken, and I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone. And I will not be shaken. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up our eyes in wonder and show me who you are and fill me with your heart and lead me in your love to those around me. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes and who you are with your heart and lead me in your arms to those around me. Dear God, Lord, I just thank you. God, I thank you that with our broken hearts, these broken words, God, I thank you that you make them good. Lord, I thank you that we as broken vessels have a place for you. God, that you've designed a hole in our heart that can only be filled by you. God, we can't fill it with the pleasures of this world. We can't fill it with the pleasures of our hearts, the desire of this place. God, I thank you that there's a space that only you can fill. Lord, I thank you that you're here right now. God, you're here with the people at home. God, you're here with everyone in this community around this world. Lord, I thank you that though we are broken, God, though we are small, Lord, that you find these words good. Lord, I just pray we lift this up to you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, we're going to do one more song here. It's a little louder.
How great thou talk to you guys about a bunch of opportunities we have this summer to get involved with that age group in reaching those kids for Christ. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of you kids. You've probably heard the term, but it's just the name of our children's ministry program stuff here. And our vision is very similar to the vision statement of some of you. The first vision point in some of you's vision statement is delighting in God. And so ours is very similar. So our vision is to go after the kids' hearts and our own hearts as we teach those kids. And we want those hearts to grow in love and faith of the Lord Jesus Christ. And we want everybody to see how great God is. I think of the verse, Matthew 22, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So in Sunday school and teaching kids, it's really easy to not do this, right? It's really easy to teach do's and don'ts. It's really easy to teach moral things. Don't do this, don't do that. Make sure you don't take your sister's truck or brother's truck, or your sister's doll. Make sure you don't, make sure you're always sharing your toys. Don't hit each other. It's easy to do moral teachings all the time. What is hard to do is teach kids how great God is, how awesome the gospel is, and how they're redeemed as little sinners, just like you and I are. So that's really what we're going for, is kids' hearts. So, what are we going to do this summer? 3 different things you can get involved with. The first is Backyards Kids Club, the first week of June. FCA Sports Camp, the second week of June. And then finally all summer, sorry, I said that wrong, second week of June, third week of June. And then all summer Sunday school classes. So I'll talk about each one of those. So the first is BKC, Backyard Kids Club. Maybe you've never heard of that before, but probably all of you heard of Vacation Bible School. So what is BKC? It's just Vacation Bible School, but instead of doing it here as a big group, we go to your backyard, my backyard, backyards all around the city, and do small versions of VBS. So we're still going to do music and games and Bible stories and crafts and snacks and all those things just in your backyard or my backyard. That's what it's all about. A couple advantages with that. One, with COVID, it's all outside, so that's good. And then it really gives us an opportunity to build those relationships long-term in those neighborhoods. So if you're inviting a couple kids down the street, maybe that's the first time you can get to know that family that lives next door to you. So it gives you more opportunities to kind of build those long-term relationships. And I was going to invite up Maggie Kelleher. She wrote the Summit Viewer article this week. I was going to have her come up and share her testimony and her experience with BKC. So you guys can just give her a hand. That'd be great.
Hi, so I was asked to share just a little bit about my experiences with BKC, and I have to admit that I dragged my kids along to the first one that we did rather reluctantly. To me, it sounded like a lot of work that I didn't really want to do because I had small kids, and I didn't feel like I needed more work on my plate. But like a lot of things in my life, I stepped out in faith reluctantly, and God provided, right? He redeemed that time, and he really blessed, and I had a lot of fun. My kids love BKC. I mean, they ask every year when it's going to be, where it's going to be, what the theme is, all the things they want to know. They love the music team. So as a family, we have hosted at our home in our backyard a couple times, and I feel like that was the biggest blessing. Seems like the more we step in, the more involved we get, the more work we do, honestly, the more we are blessed. And it was a great way just to have our kids see us serving and then have them come alongside us and serve as well. I think at one point, one of those years, one day, we had like 20 kids in our backyard plus the adults. So it was a little crazy, but it was fun. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't stepped into this before, it's not as much work as it sounds like it is, if that's encouraging to you. Part of that is because we are very blessed to have Rochelle, and she does so much work behind the scenes and makes it really pretty easy on the families. You do not have to be a Bible scholar to teach the Bible lesson to kids, right? They make it pretty easy. They give you activities, they give you discussion questions, all to help facilitate those discussions and just bring the word to kids. You don't have to be a crafting genius to do the crafts. I think that can easily be a fun part for a lot of kids. But it's all kind of prepackaged a lot of the time, so it's pretty user-friendly for adults and kids. You don't need to have an art degree. You don't have to be athletic or even all that fun to do the games with the kids, honestly. You get a whole bunch of ideas. You don't have to come up with anything yourself. And the kids really do enjoy those games, especially the water ones. We try to pick a day that's warm so we can do some of those water activities. So, although I will say on the way over here, my daughter asked me which of those things I like leading the most. And I said, probably the Bible study. And she said, really? Because nobody listens to you anyway. So we might need to work on that a little bit. But also, BKC is such an amazing outreach tool, I think, especially for families of this stage of life with younger kids. It's a great chance to bring those kids into your backyard and teach them about Jesus, obviously, and love on them. But beyond that, you can really reach the parents through the kids, too. So I think it's a great opportunity to build relationships with parents as well. And in fact, I encourage you, when you invite kids to come, to invite the parents to come, too. And they might not be able to because maybe they're working or whatever. But if you have them come along, it gives you some really great opportunities to have conversations. While your kids are doing the activities and their kids are doing activities, you can just get to know them and start building some of those relationships. So I encourage you, when you're thinking about who to invite, think about parents too, and just families in general that you want to get to know better. Also, one last thing, I think BKC has been so amazing for building unity and relationship in our small group. The last few years, our small group has put together our own BKC, and mostly it's us moms, because the dads are at work, and we divvy up the responsibilities, and we each pick what we want to do, and we just work together, we do it together, we plan it together, and it ends up being a great relationship building exercise, really. We get to spend extra time with each other that we don't normally, and our kids get to spend extra time with the other kids in the small group, more than just church and small group time. So that's been a huge blessing as well, and I really look forward to doing that with our small group every year. So all in all, it's definitely worth the work, and I encourage you to get involved. And it's really worth it when you get to see Chad and all the kids up here doing the dance moves on Celebration Sunday. So.
Thanks, Maggie. All right, so we do have an interest meeting this Tuesday night on Zoom, and we're asking those that are thinking about hosting or just want to know more to come to this meeting. Now, you don't have to host. You could find somebody that is hosting and help them out as well. But if you are going to host or just want to know more, we ask you to go onto summitview.com/kids and sign up. You'll get the Zoom link. It's about an hour long on Tuesday night. And it is on May the 4th be with you. So you can wear your Jedi costume if you want. So, all right. FCA Sports Camp. This is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. This is June 14th through 17th. This is targeted at a little bit older kid range. So BKC, I would say, is great for pre-K through 5th grade. This is going to be a little bit older for 3rd through 8th graders. This has been going on for years and years and years. They do it at Roland Moore Park. You can sign up for football, soccer, volleyball, those things. You don't need to be good at it. Like a lot of my kids just tried a new sport for the first time doing this. Also, if you're not a 3rd through 8th grader, but you're high school or college, they need huddle leaders where you can go and sign up and get a huddle of kids and teach them the gospel and teach them a sport. So great opportunities there. We're a partner church with FCA Sports Camp. You can't really read that, but the link is crosstrainingsportscamp.org. You can just Google FCA Sports Camp, Fort Collins. And finally, you can serve in Sunday school this summer. So just a quick overview of how our Sunday school works here. September through May, we do 0 through 12 age classes. In the summer, we pare it down to 0 through 6. Bunch of reasons for that, but one of them is to get our 7 through 12s in the service once in a while. So in the summer, they'll be in here with us. And the pastors are going to have something unique and special each week, like the question of the week type of thing we've done in the past, for those kids 7 through 12. So they'll hear the sermon, and the pastors will have something for them. But we do need teachers and helpers to sign up for our June, July, August. This is a great opportunity for you. Maybe if you've never served in Sunday school, you're a little skittish about it. You could just sign up for 3 weeks. That's how it works. You sign up for week 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that means you would serve the first week in June, July, and August, for example. So we would love for you, especially if you've never given it a shot before, maybe come join us in Sunday school and serve. And I wanted to recognize those of you that have served in Sunday school between October and if you're going to serve in May as well. So if you guys could stand up, I don't think we recognize you guys enough, and I kind of want the congregation to see how many of you guys serve in Sunday school. So if you guys can stand up, yeah. And a shout out to the nursery, because they're back there right now with those babies. So a shout out to them. And I just wanted to say a special thanks to the car kids. So they're not really kids, they're adults, but Julie, Jacqueline, John, and Emily. Yes, they've saved our bacon in Sunday school so many times. We didn't have a teacher. They've come in. They don't have any kids themselves, but they've come in and served in so many ways. So just a big thanks to them. Okay. And that means we're going to release our kids to Sunday school right now. So you guys know what to do, but if you're 10 through 12, you go there. If you're 7 through 9, you go there. And if you're 0 through 6, you'll go there. And I'm done, and Pastor Erd will be up next. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chad and Maggie. Exciting things. I'm just re-emphasize what Chad said. There are so many opportunities with our young children. And so I'd also just encourage you to take advantage of those. I do have a few more announcements, though. This is a heavy announcement week before we get into the message. And so let me run through a few things before we get to the sermon. And the first one is just a reminder that there's going to be an interest meeting immediately after church this morning. If you are interested at all in the Severance Church plant, we've been talking about that, of course, the last couple weeks. We are aiming to plant a church this year just across the interstate in Severance, Colorado. And so upstairs in the fellowship room at 11:15, we're going to start an interest meeting. So if you feel like, maybe I could be a part of that, be interested in finding out more about that, really encourage you to head upstairs after church to the fellowship room. Secondly, and kind of relatedly, we're going to have a prayer meeting tonight. We have been talking about missions. We're in the middle of our missions campaign here, and we've been talking about missions the last 2 weeks, and we will this week and the following week. But missions is fueled by prayer, and we understand that. I mean, that's what Jesus said. He said, the harvest is plentiful, therefore pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest field. And so we want to do that. We want to pray for laborers in the harvest field, and so we're going to do that tonight. We'll do that in many other contexts as well, especially in small groups. But we'd love for you as the church to join us. It's going to be over Zoom from 7 to 8 this evening, and we're just going to pray for everything that we've been talking about in our missions campaign. Okay. Next, just a reminder that child dedications are next Sunday. If you have a child that you would like to dedicate, this is an opportunity to commit your parenting to God. And really, it's an opportunity for us as a church to commit to love and support parents. Well, that's happening next Sunday. And so there was a link in the Summit Viewer this past week. Hopefully you're on our email list with a registration link to sign up for child dedications. Also in that Summit Viewer, there's the link for the Zoom meeting tonight. And so make sure you check out that email. One more announcement, and this is kind of the sad one, or at least the bittersweet one. And I wanted to thank Jay and Diane Yausling right now. Many of you know, most of you probably know Jay and Diane. Jay and Diane, though, are moving this next week to Omaha, Nebraska. Now, the Yauslings have been a part of our church for about the last 4 years or so. Prior to that, Jay pastored a church in Denver, one of our sister churches. They've been a part of our association of churches for decades, actually. But they moved up here about 4 years ago, and they have just been a huge part of our church. They have helped lead our hospitality ministry, welcoming people on Sunday mornings, which is an incredible blessing. Jay has also led our prayer ministry. I think he's really injected a heart for prayer into our church. And so we have appreciated them so much, and we are sad to see them go. Although Jay, this past year, he works in oil and gas, and This past year was a bad year for oil and gas, of course, as you know, and so he lost his job. He's been searching for work for the last at least 9 months, and finally expanded his circle and got a job in Omaha, which is actually around where they're from. They've been intending to move back there eventually anyways, and we also have a sister church there that they're going to connect with, and we'll get to keep in touch with them through that. But in any case, they're moving. We're going to miss them a lot, and I just wanted us to together thank them for their service these last 4 years. All right. Well, now we're going to get into our message for this morning. And as I said, we're in the middle of our missions campaign. 3rd week out of 4. The first 2 weeks, we summarized a lot of what we are doing during this campaign. We do this every year. Every spring, we try to raise a little bit of money to support cross-cultural missions in a variety of different places and support people that really have been connected to our church that are on the mission field somewhere. Well, we're doing that again this year, but we are putting a little more energy into this year's campaign. We're raising a little bit more money, and we're spending a little more time focusing on these things because we believe that God has laid on our hearts some really significant and exciting initiatives here. And so let me recap those really quickly. If you haven't been with us the last couple weeks, we are moving forward on initiatives in the local context, the regional, and the international. And so locally, we are looking to hire 2 men to invest into our next generation ministries. Regionally, we are looking to plant a church in Severance, Colorado. And then internationally, we are continuing to support a handful of missionaries that we are connected to, and many of which have come out of our church. And so we are aiming to raise $50,000, and that will be distributed to help support these different projects. And so the first 2 weeks, we have summarized and gone into a little detail about what we're actually trying to do with each of those projects. Well, this week and next week, we are going to talk more about our contribution to these projects as an entire church. And part of that is going to be, of course, financial. We are in a fundraising campaign, and so I'm going to talk about that this morning. But in addition to that, and I would say even more significant than that, we're going to talk next week about our non-financial contribution. Because I don't believe that finances will be the limiting factor in making these things a success. What we really need is for the entire church to unite and for every part to be doing its work, as it says in Ephesians chapter 4. And we are really eager for every member to be a minister here. And so we're going to talk about that next week and what that really looks like. But as I said, this week, we are going to talk a little bit about finances. We're going to talk about giving. And I know that can be an awkward and sensitive topic. And when a church begins to talk about money, and especially about giving, there can be a very understandable guardedness. There can be a suspicion. We've all heard the stories about private jets and Hawaiian vacations and just the general abuse of church funds in various places. And so there can be an understandable guardedness. And I can even be reluctant to share because I know that a lot of the world, especially outside the church, looks at the church and says, yeah, they assume you guys only talk about money. And I can be nervous about the visitor that shows up on the money week. And they say, see, I told you so. They just want my money. And so for all those reasons, I can be reluctant to talk about money and to talk about giving. And yet, if we are reading our Bibles, we must talk about it. Because Jesus talked about it a lot. And Jesus talked about it for a reason. Because Jesus knew about God, and he knew about the human heart, and he knew about how the world works. And he knew that God is after our hearts. God is after our worship. That's what he's interested in. But he knew there would be a primary competitor for our worship, and that would be money. As it says in Romans 1, we are very drawn as human beings, as sinful human beings, to worship created things rather than the Creator. We tend to set aside the giver. We don't want him messing with us and just zero in on his gifts. Money is that one thing that tends to represent all of the created things. Because money, all of those created things, it's like they have a monetary value. And so money can often be the way that I access all of my false gods. It's the funnel that all my idolatry goes through, is money. And Jesus was well aware of this. He knew this was going to be the battleground, and that's why he said things like this in Matthew 6:24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. He highlighted money as a potential master of our hearts, and that there would be this competition, and we couldn't serve both of them. We couldn't have two masters here. And so often, money seems to gain the upper hand and enslave us. And so, because Jesus knew this, and he talked about it so much, we must as well. If we are also interested in hearts and in worship, then we must address this battleground. And I would say even more often than we probably have in the past. I was just looking through our old sermon schedules, and I believe the last time we really talked about money with a Sunday morning service was exactly 2 years ago in May 2019. We were going through the book of 1 Timothy, and in 1 Timothy 6, there's a section on money. And so that was the last time we really addressed it head on with a sermon. But even then, we didn't give a lot of real practical instruction. We didn't really touch on giving that much, and I think that has been a disservice to ourselves as a church. I think it is critical that we talk about money and to do so unapologetically. And I think even as I've been thinking through this and preparing for this, I've gone from a reluctance to feeling compelled that we really do need to address this and to do it consistently. Have a regular conversation about money. Because after all, money is a cruel master. It's a cruel master. This is what it says in 1 Timothy chapter 6. It says, "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." Okay, money is a cruel master, or the love of money, I should say. Money in itself, as we'll talk about momentarily, is not evil in itself, but the love of money is. Money as a master is. And it's really destructive. And so we do need to talk about it, and even specifically to talk about giving. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. And of course, that's appropriate as we are in this fundraising campaign. And so we're going to talk about the specifics of really what we're aiming for with this missions campaign financially. However, we're just going to get to those specifics at the very end of this morning. Most of this morning, we're going to talk more generally about money and about giving, because what we're really interested in is the appropriate heart of faith when it comes to our giving. Okay, if we could cultivate a heart, the kind of heart that Jesus really encourages when it comes to giving, and then we miss our goal, that would be a victory. Okay, so that's what we're really going to talk about. But money is a cruel master. God is a benevolent king, though. He is good. When he is our master, when we are in submission to him, there are, as it says in Psalm 16, pleasures forevermore. Place of great rejoicing and peace and freedom when we are in submission to God. I believe that that in this competition between money and God as our master, giving is what transfers our allegiance from money to God. At least it's a big part of transferring that allegiance. Biblical giving and the heart of generosity and faith that God encourages does so much to drain money of its power to enslave us. And it does so much to transfer our allegiance to God and then put money in its right place, where it goes from a cruel master to a useful tool. And it can be a very, very useful tool. Again, we'll get into that later. But I think there is so much power in a biblical pattern of giving to transfer that allegiance and free us from all that ruin and destruction that comes along with the love of money. After all, giving is about faith. Fundamentally, it's about faith. It's not just about accomplishing something in this world with our money, although that's a piece of it too, which we'll get to. But fundamentally, it's about faith. It's about a transfer of trust. It transfers trust from our money to God when we give as the Bible prescribes. And faith is what it's all about. Okay, faith is what God wants. It's what he's interested in. Remember, Galatians 5, the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Or Abraham's faith was credited as righteousness. God's currency is faith. That's what he really deals with. That's what he desires. A biblical act of giving is really an act of faith. And that's what we're after. And that's what we're encouraged in when it comes to the Bible's instruction on money and giving. 1 Timothy 6, going back to that chapter again, I'll share verse 17. As for the rich in this present age, charge them. So Paul is talking to Timothy. He says, make sure you address this. Okay, I want you to command them, charge them, not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. So there's a transfer of our hope, our trust, our faith, and that is what we must be charged with. To relinquish our trust in money and transfer that to God. And often that comes through giving. And again, it's an act of faith, and that's what we're after. It's kind of like, I was comparing it a little bit to the Sabbath command in the Old Testament. If you're familiar with the Sabbath command, the Israelites were to honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. It was one of the 10 commandments. Now, if I was coming up with a list of 10 rules that summarized morality, the Sabbath command wouldn't make the list. But God's smarter than me. And it did make his list. And it made his list for a reason. Because God knew that it wasn't just about not doing certain things. Morality itself was rooted in trusting God, finding rest in him, uniting our hearts with him. And so he gave this Sabbath commandment, and he really expanded on it. He gives quite a bit of ink in the Old Testament to it and repeats it throughout the Old Testament. What was the Sabbath command in essence? Well, it was a transfer of trust. To stop working on that one day would have been really, really hard, especially in that society, that more agrarian society. Because it would have been compelling. They would have felt like, well, I've got to work just to make things happen, to protect myself, to make sure things don't fall apart in my life. I've got to keep things going. Well, God comes in and says, actually, I want you to set aside this day, and I don't want you to work on it, and I want you to honor me with this day, and trust me that I'll fill in the gaps. Okay, that I'll support you here. You can afford to not work here because I'm going to fill in. And he invited the Israelites to walk in that because it was an act of faith. It was entrusting life to God. I believe it's very similar with an act of giving. Because it feels like if I give that, everything's going to fall apart. And I need to be self-sufficient here. And I need to make sure all my bases are covered. I got to keep this money. But I think God desires to walk us into a place of faith and trust where he says, if you release this, I will fill in. And it's one of the most tangible demonstrations of trust in God. And again, that's what we're after, and that's why I can feel like I can unapologetically encourage giving, because it is such an act of faith, and it is so transforming in a life. When we break those bonds from money as our master and say, I will trust God here, there is something that comes alive spiritually in us. So much is released there when we walk in that faith, which is why we should talk about this. But of course, there is a need or a desire for all of us to get into the specifics. Say, okay, I may want to walk in faith here related to my money, but what does that mean, and what does that even practically mean? For one, how much does that mean? Hey, we can ask that question. Well, how much is God asking of me? Well, that's a little bit of a complicated question and answer, actually. But let me make a few points. Now, first of all, in the Old Testament, God commands the giving of a tithe throughout the Old Testament. Okay? Literally, tithe means tenth. So that's what it was. God wanted a tenth of income to be brought. And in this case, brought to the priests to support the priests and support the work in the temple among the ancient Israelites. So he said, bring a tenth. And he commanded that repeatedly throughout the Old Testament and re-emphasized it in different places. And perhaps the strongest place he re-emphasized that was at the very end of the Old Testament in the book of Malachi, chapter 3. And this is what God says through Malachi the prophet. And he says, will man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? In your tithes and contributions. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, says the Lord of hosts. See if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. And so, God is really strong here. And he equates the withholding of the tithe to robbery. He says, you're stealing from me. This is rightfully mine, and you're stealing from me. And so he's strong here. And this is the strength with which God talks about the tithe throughout the Old Testament. However, the astute Bible reader and the Christian will raise a little bit of an objection here, and appropriately so, and say, yes, but we are New Covenant Christians. And when Jesus came, he replaced the old covenant that the Israelites were under with a new covenant. And that old covenant was meant for a specific people at a specific time in a specific context. And he gave lots of rules, detailed rules, that were to be applied specifically for them. But Jesus has freed us from a lot of those rules, and now he is having us walk in a covenant that's based on grace and on faith. And we are no longer under that old covenant. And the New Testament doesn't even explicitly renew those tithe commands. There's nowhere in the New Testament that directly, explicitly says, give a tenth. And all of that's true. Now, there are some hints that the tithe does transcend the Old Covenant. For example, in the book of Genesis 14, Abraham gives a tenth to Melchizedek. This was before the tithe was instituted through the law of Moses. And so it seemed to be something that was done even prior to the Old Covenant, to the law. And also, Jesus seems to hint at that it's an ongoing thing in different places in the New Testament, although he never says it clearly. And it's not something that we can draw a firm line on. The New Testament instruction, rather than a specific number, encourages, well, actually, let me share that verse real quick. 2 Corinthians 9:7, this is what the New Testament says. It says, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So it's like God is walking us away from the specific rule into a certain heart. And what the New Testament does encourage, rather than a specific number, is a general heart of generosity. The New Testament command is to be generous. Okay, we could go back to 1 Timothy 6 once again. It says, they are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. So the New Testament command is generosity. That's what we're all under. If you are a believer in Jesus, there's an obligation on you to be generous, because Jesus was generous to you and we are to mimic him. We must be generous. Here's the challenging question, though, for me. If I'm called to be generous, the question is generosity less than a tithe? Is it going to be less than a tithe? If the tithe was just the standard for every Old Testament Jew, regardless of income, me as a New Testament Christian, called to generosity, should I give less than a tithe? And I personally have not come to that conclusion that would be appropriate. It seems like God set up a standard here, tithe. He indicated in different places, sort of implicitly, that maybe it transcends the old covenant, but then he called us to a heart of generosity, and that generosity should be expressed in a certain way, and it would be difficult for me to say that would be less than a tithe. I like the way that Randy Alcorn, who's written quite a bit on money and tithing, describes tithing. He says, I view tithing as a child's first steps. Not the best she'll ever do, but simply a good beginning on which her parents celebrate. Tithing is like the training wheels on the bicycle of giving. And I think there's a truth there. And I wonder if God has given us a little bit of a standard here to point us in the right direction. Point us in the right direction as we cultivate a heart of generosity. And my hope for my own life is that my generosity grows beyond that, and that I can give 12% or 15% or maybe 50%. Is that where God wants to take us as we cultivate this heart of generosity? For some of us, I think he specifically wants to take us there because that's how he's gifting us. Romans 12 talks about spiritual gifts, and it lists a number of different spiritual gifts. These are gifts that God, the Holy Spirit himself, implemented in a believer's life, and did some special, unique work in certain believers to produce a certain amount of gifting in their lives. And there are several gifts that are listed. I just want to highlight this one, though. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. The one who contributes in generosity. Some people are uniquely gifted in contributing, and specifically generous contribution. Perhaps there's a unique vocation that allows them to do that. Whatever the case, they are positioned to contribute in a unique way and to do so generously. And I think we should all give ourselves the opportunity to explore what God is inviting each one of us to do in terms of our generosity. Okay? So, giving, I believe, is an exercise, number one, in trust. As I described earlier, it's at its foundation, it's an act of faith, because I'm saying, God will continue to take care of me. God can be trusted. God will supply. And by the way, I've seen him do it over and over and over again in my own life and in others' lives. When somebody takes that step of release and says, I'm going to honor God with this portion, with my first fruits, even though it's scary, and I don't know if it's going to work. When somebody does that, there is a freedom that's brought into their life. First of all, so often God shows himself in crazy, miraculous ways. But also there is a release from anxiety and from a lot of that ruin and destruction that the love of money brings. There is such a peace there, and I've seen people discover that peace so many times. But giving is an exercise in trust. Secondly, giving is an exercise in obedience. And so God calls us to generosity, and as we make him Lord in our lives, we do want to follow him in that and walk in obedience and say, yes, I will pursue God in these things. So trust and obedience, just like the hymn says, trust and obey. There's no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. And so giving is an exercise in both of these things, and this is what we're after. But thirdly, and this is where we're going with our missions campaign, giving is an exercise also in strategic investment. So there is a work that's done in my own life when I give according to biblical standards. There's a faith that's brought into my life. There's a healthy obedience that I walk in. But also understand that our money can make a difference in this world. Okay, as I transfer my allegiance to God from money, money does become a useful tool. And I can use it well, and I can use it for things that matter and that last. I'm going to share a couple verses related to that. One, in Luke 16, Jesus says this. Now, this is a little bit of a sort of a cryptic verse, a little hard to understand on the surface, but I think we can understand what he's trying to say. This is after he tells a parable about the shrewd manager. And he says, I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth, which is basically just meaning worldly money, the world used in the money used in the world, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. And it seems that Jesus is saying, okay, I want you to use the very temporary money that you've been given in this world in ways that will make an eternal impact in other people's lives. I think that's what he's saying here. Similarly, I think we could draw that out of Matthew 6 again, 19 through 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think he's saying a couple things in this passage. Number one, to place your money into places that will have some eternal mileage. Okay, do not use your money primarily for things that will break down and will not last, but make an effort to use money for eternally significant things. Okay, put your treasures in heaven. But also, the final line of this passage, and this passage is about money. This is where that verse I shared earlier about not having two masters comes from. But that last line says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think there's something here that says when I place my treasure or my money in a certain place, my heart is drawn there as well. Okay? And typically our actions come out of our heart attitude and inclination, and that's the way that it should be. But sometimes it works in the opposite direction too, where my actions can lead my heart. I think so often when we invest into eternal things, our hearts go there as well. And again, we experience a joy and a freedom when we do that. And so we want to use our money in ways that really do make a difference and make a difference for God eternally. And so we might ask, well, where then? Where do I direct this portion of my money that God has called me to give? Well, there are lots of different places that I think we can and should give. But I again want to unapologetically make a case for the local church. Because I believe that the local church is God's plan A for what he wants to accomplish. And I believe that so much happens through the local church, and it's not always flashy. And I think sometimes we can be drawn to give our money to flashier places. But I think the action is in the church. I really do. That's where the basic, simple work of discipleship happens. Where those 4 through 14-year-olds are brought to Christ, and they're raised up, and they're given a certain direction. And so much happens in the church that takes spiritual ground for the eternal kingdom. And it's a worthy place of investment. It's like, there are flashier things out there, but I think they originate in the church. It's like the church is the petri dish where things grow and then things are launched. And so it has been my personal practice and conviction to prioritize the church with my tithe and to support the very essential work of discipleship, making disciples, that happens within the church. However, in addition to that, my hope, again, for my own life is to grow that and be able to support much more, even outside of the church, in addition to the church, those things that are launched out of the church even. And of course, that brings us to our missions campaign. And I want to very quickly summarize what we're looking at here in terms of finances for this campaign. Now, before I do that, just a couple quick things. First of all, as I've been sort of implying here, if you have not yet developed that habit, that practice of consistent giving in faith, even to your local church, I would say don't worry about the missions campaign. Okay, set it aside. Develop that practice first. Okay. Also, as we talk about giving to this missions campaign, understand that this is just a free will giving. We are under no obligation. You are under no obligation at all, no biblical obligation. I think there is reason to believe that, yes, he does want us to walk in certain practices, even the tithe, but this is in addition to that. These are extra initiatives beyond the local typical ministry of the church. We are advancing beyond there. And so this is completely out of freedom and faith, and so there should be no sense of obligation here at all. If you are to give it all to our missions campaign, we just want it to be out of a place of faith. And we're not even looking for any individual to give an extremely significant amount. We're much more interested in, again, that faith. If a 12-year-old gives $1 a month, you might be thrilled with that as an expression of faith, because that's what we need. We need the church as a whole to bring faith, regardless of what that looks like. So do not feel obligated. If you are not practicing regular giving, I would say give your attention there at first, and I would say just think through whatever is an act of faith for you as you may consider what to give here. But let's get into some of the details here. And first of all, as I said earlier, that we're aiming to raise $50,000 to support these different initiatives. Well, let's first compare that actually to last year's campaign. We do this every year, and we tried to raise some money last year for missions projects. Last year, we were just getting into COVID. And so we wanted to be a little conservative there. Typically, I would say we raise between $30,000 and $40,000 each year for our missions campaign. Last year, we scaled it back to $22,000. We thought this is what could still support the projects that we've already been a part of, and so our target was $22,000. However, you guys pledged $37,442. And so even at the beginning of COVID, in a very scary time, you guys were extraordinarily generous. And I really appreciate that. That is an amazing testimony to the faith in this room. $37,000, so there was no drop-off in the giving, even in that kind of uncertain time. That was among 49 different pledgers. Okay, 49 different pledgers, so average of probably about $750 over the year per pledger gave. Now we have upwards of around 200 total giving units in this church that have given in recent years. And so about a fourth of those gave extra to missions last year, and we were able to raise $37,000, and that was spectacular. This year, we're really not shooting for that much more, just $50,000. So say we're increasing that by about a third. Okay? And I think that's very, very attainable. Okay? And so let's break that down though a little bit more. Just for those of you that like numbers, we'll just give you an overview of what you guys gave last year. And so you'll just see how it's broken down. A number of people just gave one-time contributions or pledges, which was great. One person gave $50 or less. 10 were in the $50 to $250 range, and then you'll see the different numbers there of what people gave as a one-time gift, and then there were a bunch of monthly pledges there as well. Now, to meet our goal this year, there would be a variety of ways, obviously, to do that. Number one, these 49 people re-upped their contribution and increased it by a third. Okay, that could be a possibility. Or we could have another third, increase the number of pledgers by a third, which I think would be really exciting. Where say we had another 15 or 20 people give, and they fell into some of these little buckets here. Or we could have even more pledgers, at lesser amounts even, give in a way that our entire church got behind, and we each made a contribution, even if it was very, very small, and we could meet our goal as well. And I think that would be really, really exciting. And so, with all of that, this week, we just wanted to lay that out. We wanted to invite you into a heart of generosity that starts with a consistent giving, but then to consider joining us in this, to consider investing your treasure into these initiatives, and having your heart go there as well. And so, I'm going to leave us again with 2 Corinthians 9:7, and then I'll give you a couple other instructions. But I read this earlier, and it says, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And especially in this case, that's the heart we're after. And what we want you to do this next week is to prayerfully consider, what would this look like for me? Maybe, again, it's nothing. Okay? And maybe God would want you to focus just on regular giving and a regular practice of generosity in some way. But maybe he would have you decide in your heart, not out of compulsion, but make a specific and resolved decision, thoughtful, prayerful decision, to decide in your heart to cheerfully contribute to these things that we are excited to move forward. And that's what we want to encourage you to take the next week to do, to pray about that. Okay, we do have pledge cards, and there are some stacks of them out in the lobby. There are pledge cards for a financial contribution and actually a non-financial contribution as well, just your time and your resources, your service. You'd be welcome to grab one of those cards and take it home and just consider and pray about this. We will have more cards next week, and we're going to pass one out to each person. Then Travis is going to walk us through just thinking about our contribution, and then we'd love for you to turn in whatever God leads you in as a cheerful, non-reluctant gift that you've decided in your own heart. Okay, and so that's the goal for this next week, to take that time. And we'd encourage small groups to talk about that a little bit too, and see how we can unite as a body. If you gave last year to this, we are so thankful, And we'd love for you to consider continuing that gift. If you didn't give, we'd love for you to consider, maybe God would have me do that this year. And I think this goal is very, very attainable. I'm going to invite the band back up here. We're going to sing one more song. Sorry, we went a little late this morning. We definitely packed a lot in here. But again, we are after a faith in God, a transfer of trust, a transfer of allegiance from money to God. And it's a good place to be. Money is a cruel master. God is a benevolent king. And I think a simple act of giving, a simple act of generosity can do so much in a heart to transfer that trust and live in the peace that he offers. Let's stand and sing.
Fullness of your grace is here with me. The richness of your beauty is all I see. The brightness of your glory has arrived. In your presence, God, I'm completely satisfied. Oh, for you, I sing, I dance, I rejoice in this divine romance. Lift my heart and my hands to show my love, to show my love. What deep, deep flood, an ocean flows from you. What deep, deep love, yeah, it's filling up the room. Whoa, your innocent blood has washed my guilty life. In your presence, God, I'm completely satisfied. Oh, for you, I sing, I dance, I rejoice in this divine romance. Lift my heart and my hands to show my love. Whoa, for you, I sing, I dance, I rejoice in this divine romance. Lift my heart and my hands to show my love, to show my love. Oh, for you, I sing, I dance, I rejoice in this divine romance. Lift my heart and my hands to show my love. Alrighty, guys, thanks for worshiping with us this morning. Have a great Sunday.
Check 1, 2. Real quick, one more announcement since this was the week of announcements. Just for those of us that are in the room. We, yesterday, did our spring cleaning backstage, kind of cleaned out a bunch of equipment, and really it turned into the 15-year purge. So there's some sound equipment, some instruments, some cables, things like that. They're on the wall in the gym, the short wall over here. And if you guys want to just look through those things, we're going to give that stuff away. If you want to take it before we cart it off, go ahead and just take anything that you see over there. All right, thanks.